urban ethnographer. I've been working in Colombia since 2015, and I have two main active research lines. The first is looking at adolescent trajectories into organized crime and violence at Colombia's urban margins. In particular, I've been working in and around Medellín, the region of Antioquia. And for that, I conducted long-term ethnographic research for overall more than 2 years. The second research line that I have is more around youth activism and urban peace building, because as much as crime and drugs are pervasive in the peripheries where I worked, there was also an incredible amount of energy around young people. And so after my PhD, I wanted to explore through a short postdoc, you know, how young people from the same neighborhoods where I had done research on crime and violence actually mobilize to sort of create a better and more peaceful environment for themselves and for their peers. Again, this resulted in a interesting micro documentary series, which is available on my website, that we created with these young people, that features 5 examples of ways of building peace from the bottom up through arts, through sports, through activism, etc., etc. The book is really built around the lives of 7 of the kids I worked with, the ones that I built deepest rapport with throughout the months that I was working in Colombia. Well, what the book really tries to do is to really look at the full spectrum of their lives and see how this kid who, yes, they all deal drugs and are implicated in these networks, they also have, you know, family, passions, love, friendship, and the book really puts these narratives and these daily realities center stage to, in a way, put a human face to crime. And in terms of what the book says, I think I try to make 3 core points. The first is that, you know, the gangs that these young kids end up joining are not supportive and family-like structures, a bit like we may be used to thinking of the gang as the alternative of the family for kids who have dysfunctional families. Actually, today's gangs in Colombia operate as the local arms of much broader criminal organizations that have transnational ties. They are very hierarchical structures. They are highly formalized, highly institutionalized, and they are much more similar to an enterprise than to a family. And this means that the kids working at the low ends of these gangs, just like, you know, the precarious workers of a large transnational enterprise, have the lowest pay, the highest risk, and the toughest job, and they can easily be dismissed, which in the criminal world often means killed or threatened or sent away for the smallest mistake. So life at the low ends of crime, what the book says, is really precarious and is really insecure. And linked to that, another core point of the book is that even though a lot of these kids look for a life in crime as a way of obtaining socioeconomic emancipation, you know, there are no avenues through formal jobs, opportunities are few, and so you try to make a life through crime. Yes, this ambition is there, but at the same time, those who really achieve this socioeconomic emancipation through criminal lives are very few. There is very little upward social mobility. The trajectory upwards is often stuck, and most of these youth end up in prison or in hospital or killed or manage to leave the gang well before they make a career into crime. I guess finally, what the book also shows is that, especially in those very early stages of criminal engagement, the kids I worked with were between, you know, 13 and 19, most of them. There is a lot of insecurity and uncertainty about what they are doing. So, you know, as much as, yes, they do grow up with the model of Pablo Escobar, the big narco, and there is this you know, idolatrization of the criminal figure, yet at the same time, they have a lot of insecurities, they have a lot of doubts and a lot of self-questioning, and they never stop looking for something better. And that is where we can tap, I think, as practitioners, you know, to try to support these young people to do what they really want to do, rather than always tell them what they shouldn't be doing. mano dura or tough on crime approaches that have so often been used to deal, especially with kids that get involved in crime, are highly ineffective. And it's very surprising how, especially in the Latin America region, conservative governments keep employing these approaches. So a first main point is, of course, advocacy, keeping advocating against this stuff on crime approaches. But the alternative narrative that emerged in the sector over the past decade or so, I would say, is the one around providing alternative opportunities, understanding that these kids enter into crime because they don't have opportunities in the legal market, or they have difficulties completing their education. And so this idea that we should provide them with these opportunities, well, this works until a certain extent. And it's, of course, a very important work. But what I found in my research is that a lot of the kids I worked with didn't even believe that they could, have a normal life in a way. They always talked about the normal life, the normal job, the normal education as something very far away that they didn't even dare to dream about. This often has to do with their upbringing, with what they've been told within their family and in their first years of schooling, that they were good for nothing. And so I think a lot of the work that needs to be done directly with these kids is, a lot of one-to-one psychological work on assisting them to dare to dream again, and dare to dream about a different future, and then make a plan on how to make use of these alternative opportunities that are emerging and are, NGOs or governments are providing more and more. So I think this is an important side of the work. A second policy point, I would say, is the importance of intervening early. We tend to forget working with adolescents in the practice sector because they are a tough population to work with. So a lot of work is centered either on children or on young people above 18. Adolescents are a tough population, but they, from brain development point of view, they are also, adolescence is the age where the brain develops the most after early childhood, and it's really a second window of opportunity to influence a life. And what I remarked is that it's precisely during adolescence that these kids, like many other adolescents around the world, are asking themselves what to do with their lives, and are more easily steered in one direction or the other depending on what is presented onto them. So I would say just a greater focus on adolescents, even though it is hard to find the right methods to engage them, etc., is another important policy point. And finally, but not least, we should never forget the broader structural question. So crime and violence often, or almost always, I would say, emerge from context of high inequality and socio-spatial fragmentation. And these are issues that it's hard for NGOs like of the size I work with to work on. It's more the job of governments, and it needs redistribution policy, urban planning, etc. But I think what we should never forget is that the question is not about the individual. It's not the individual that makes the wrong choice, it's the context that pushes us to make a choice. And to really have that clear in the way we formulate our programs, our advocacy. Yes, we may help the individual if they want our support and help, but it's not to say that the individual is doing something wrong, him or herself.